Hello. I'm going to do a podcast on the Russian advance in Ukraine. The perception is that the Russian advance is going very slowly, that they're having all kinds of setbacks, that the Ukrainian army is setting up this, very competent defense, and the Russians are frustrated and not getting anywhere. That's what you're going to see in the Western media. Okay, you're hearing about the Ukrainian, victories and counterattacks, and shown a video of a destroyed Russian tank. That's what you're going to see in the Western media. Okay. Now, I can tell you with 100% confidence that that narrative is completely opposite of what is the reality happening in the eastern portion of Ukraine. Okay. And I have been following the intel reports from both sides since the beginning of the war. I can't say here because I'll be censored on where you can get the true news. Okay, but you can find it if you look hard enough. Okay, and I probably have reviewed about 500 hours of mostly combat footage between Ukraine and Russia. So I can confidently say that I think I know what's going on over there. Okay, and I mean, other than boots on the ground, I think this is about the best you're going to get, Um, and I also follow boots on the ground as well. So now, the Russians initially, I think they kind of blundered a little bit, and they were overconfident that if they were just to kind of move in quickly into Ukraine, that the people would revolt, probably based on their intel, because really the Ukrainian people are basically held hostage. That's the way you have to look at the Ukrainians, whether it's fear of the Russians, which in eastern Ukraine is probably very low, or it's the fear of the Ukrainian army and the Azov battalion. Okay, and I can tell you in the eastern part of Ukraine that seems to be the overriding sentiment, that the Ukrainian people are very fearful, and they look at the Ukrainian army as a parasitic entity. Okay, now I'm not going to go too much into details of the situation with the corrupt government and how the Ukrainians are mistreating the Ukrainian people and so on in this podcast. But I want to focus more on what I see in the kind of the boots on the ground videos and so on, and my analysis of what's going on with the Russian attack. Okay. And you have to remember that this is not a full-fledged invasion. Okay? The people still have their electricity. The people, well, mostly, and the people still have their telephone services. They're probably watching some, TV channels. So if this was a full-fledged invasion and the Russians were looking at the Ukrainian people as an enemy, this would not be the situation that it would be in with all the utilities functioning and so on. So going back to Putin and his initial pledge, so to say, was that they were going to liberate Ukrainian, the Russian-speaking in Ukrainian people from the atrocities that's going on in their special military operation, which is kind of look maybe like a big policing operation. Okay, so what the Russians are doing is they're advancing in. I think it's a better word than invading. They're advancing into Ukraine. They're basically trying to remove the Ukrainian army from like cities and towns, settlements. They call them lots of places they call settlements, which is probably like a village, and it's probably more agrarian, like a farming community kind of thing, as far as what I can tell. What they're trying to do is remove the Ukrainian army from all these places without damaging as much of the infrastructure as that's possible. But the problem is that the Ukrainian army is using that as sort of hostage against the Russians, because they know the Russians don't want to destroy all these things like the administration buildings. They don't want to destroy the utilities and so on, and homes of people. So this is why the Ukrainian army is hiding in the hospitals. There's a lot of videos of the Ukrainians hiding in schools, even kindergartens, even with people still there. Like in the hospitals, they'll be like on the top floor, and they'll have the bottom floors, still functioning as a hospital. They'll be in high-rise apartment buildings on several floors, which basically is forcing the Russians to destroy all these things. And this is part of the plan of the CIA, MI6, who's really running the strategy here, and giving a lot of this advice, say, to the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainian leadership's not running that country, because they would have surrendered a long time ago, because their country's basically going to be gone, and the top leadership in Ukraine knows this. Like Zelensky knows this. He's just going along with it because he has no choice. He's a puppet. He was assigned this role by the CIA, State Department of the United States. So the Russians, let's get back to what I was saying initially about how reviewing the combat footage and so on. And I can tell you how the Russians, after their initial sort of blunder, I would say, going in there full, just overly confident and, trying to take a lot of land real quick and hoping that the Ukrainian people were just going to welcome them. And they kind of did, actually. There's a lot of footage of people alongside the roads, and they're waving, old Soviet flags and Russian flags and so on. So in some areas there was a lot of welcoming by the civilians, but the Russian forces were not so lucky with the Ukrainian army. They probably thought that they were going to kind of lay down their arms and surrender or go away. Initially, the Russian leadership was saying that basically if you could just walk away if you wanted to to the Ukrainian troops. But as the war kept on going on and on, I don't think it's working out that way, and the Russians are taking them as POWs now. So reviewing the combat footage, this is what I'm seeing. Like, why is the Russians going a little slow here? And what's their approach? How are they doing this? Okay, they're doing very well. They're doing extremely well, and that's so hard to grasp if you're following the Western mainstream media. But I can tell you from reviewing this footage of everything that I'm seeing, that the Russian advance is going very, very well. It's a very methodical advance, and this is what they're doing. Okay, and they kind of learned quickly. Now Mariupol is a little different. That was just that's just battled it out in the city, and I think this is where the Russians are like, hey, this is not probably the way we want to do this, and I think in Kharkov they're like, they're not going to do that again. Not that the Russians didn't do well. I mean, they took Mariupol, but look at it. It's a horrible looking place now. But life is getting back to normal. Okay. Now, so what are the Russians doing? They're advancing very methodically. This seems to be their approach. They use a lot of UAVs. And they use the UAVs to guide artillery, and they use them as recon, like extensively. They're not going to go into a position without having like a very, very capable recon. Okay, so to recon everything out with UAVs, and it's down like you could see the Ukrainian troops in the trenches. It's that accurate, and they really get an idea what's in that position. Okay, so the next step they're going to do is they're going to send in physical recon and some snipers up just within distance. Now keep in mind that the Russians can outgun the Ukrainians very easily. All their weaponry is superior to what the Ukrainians. Ukrainians are basically using older Soviet era equipment, and most of it is derelict. You'll see a lot of like tanks that aren't capable of moving. Their ammunition, shortages and things. The problem is that the logistics is broken in Ukraine. So, they have a lot of things that just aren't working. Part shortages, stuff like this. So the Ukrainians have, everything being mapped out by the Russians. So the Russians know exactly what they need to move up. So they move up all these, snipers and special forces and things, and they start probing the line. Then they send in the artillery. And you have to know that the Russians are experts in artillery. It goes back to World War II. They knew that this is how you break an enemy. It's with the artillery. So the Russians pound the artillery on the Ukrainians like unbelievable. And I'll see if I can put some pictures up of positions after an artillery strike. There's nothing left. Nothing. And people are literally vaporized who are in the more direct line of the fire of the artillery. It's so intense. And then there's also like TOS. There's a flamethrower artillery. I mean, it's very, very, very powerful stuff. Now, there's this flamethrower artillery. Just I don't know if I can find one of those footages. It blankets an area with basically artillery with fire, and it's over a few football fields in size, and everything in that area is gone. There's nothing left. You'll have a rusted hulk of a tank. Its turret will be blasted off somewhere, 50 meters away. It's just unbelievable, the force of this artillery that the Russians are using. It's devastating. And that's the next step. So they do that, and then they'll move up some tanks. And again, keep in mind that the Ukrainians can't hit the tanks with all these weaponry that the United States and the British provided the Ukrainians, because the range is they don't have the ability to get to that range because the Russians staying out of it. They're smart. So the Russians just move up into the range, and then they'll pound whatever remaining things are left, like any real heavy fortified positions that did not get hit with the artillery or were partially damaged. They're going to just smash these to bits with powerful close range for a tank, and then they're also going to call in airstrikes. Now, the way the Russians are doing the airstrikes, because initially they had some losses with the aircraft, okay? So the Russians are coming in at extremely low level, like literally over a rooftop, like by a few hundred feet. It's amazing. I'm going to see if I can put some footage up of a Russian jet pass over. Okay, you don't have a chance to pick up a Stinger or try to shoot down one of these jets. It's just impossible because it's gone. It came and gone in like 3 seconds, literally, and it's pretty amazing to watch. And there's a lot of flybys out there. I'm gonna put one up for you. So that's the next step. So they come in really close range, and they'll hit the positions again with the jets. And S-300s and everything, they're not going to be able to do anything at these super low altitudes as well. So basically it's complete immunity for the Russian jets. So the Russians have not lost very many jets in I would say the last month of this conflict, based on how they quickly learned and they improvised their tactics. Then the next thing they do is you got your tanks moving in. You've already pounded everything with artillery, airstrikes. Their mortars, things like that, again, have moved up with the tanks. So this is all the way it's going. The snipers are picking off anyone who's still there, as far as infantrymen. And then the next step is they'll bring in their infantry units. Okay, and the infantry units are basically used to as a mop up and document, as part of their role. So the infantrymen are not really going to be in there like hand-to-hand combat and fighting with bayonets and things like this. The infantry is not going to have much to encounter. They're going to be documenting the dead. They pull all their IDs. They'll photograph the bodies with the identification. They're looking for the tattoos of the NZs. They're going to get all the Western weapons, because all these positions have just hordes of British and American javelins and stingers. They're like lying around everywhere. I don't know if the Ukrainians even have confidence in using them. It seems that I hear there's a real low rate of fire. Like I heard something like about half of them. There's something wrong with it where it doesn't work. They just want like the RPGs and things, stuff that's easy to use. And so they go in there to grab all the weapons, to line them all up, take pictures of everything, and they're very meticulous in documenting everything. They'll take photos of all the positions that were destroyed. So what they're doing is they're documenting everything, and they're using this learning experience, to even improve things even more. And what I can see, the accuracy, with what they're doing is stunning. Like there is a video of a tank that has a direct hit, literally, by an artillery shell. And there's not much around it that was blown up. It's like they were able to literally pinpoint a tank using the UAV as the artillery spotter, and they literally hit the tank. I mean that's the accuracy, and they're literally hitting like trenches, like in the middle of a trench, like not a football field away. The artillery now is so different than what you think about in World War II. Also, what I'm seeing on the Ukrainian side, that's the Russian side. Okay. And so basically the infantry goes in and mops everything up and document everything. Okay. So what do you have on the Ukrainian side? Okay, the Ukrainian side is not made up of seasoned fighters. Like people are probably thinking, oh, these are great, highly, trained, seasoned, because they've been fighting in Donbass for years and stuff. Now these troops appear to be more like just like conscripts. I don't think the regular guy in Ukraine is behind Zelensky. I just don't see that fever in the troops, from everything I've seen. Most of them are like kind of goofballs, and they're not well trained. Like when you look at the Russian troops, they're very meticulous. They seem to be fairly dedicated, and professional from the videos that I've seen. Okay, I'm sure not all this is 100% because I'm getting some propaganda probably from the other side as well. So, but I'm trying to look at both sides. And the propaganda from both sides, you have to balance everything out. So it seems like the Ukrainians, like I said, they don't seem to be very educated in how to use the Western weapons. And a lot of the Western weapons, like I said, misfire and they're not working very, very well. So I think that their confidence is really low and all that. So they're not using them. So you'll see like they'll have like a little makeshift bunker, like with their trench systems, and it'll be full of all these Western weapons, and it's just sitting there. It's not like they were using them like out in the trenches. They were just like hoarding them in there. It's like, well, if you really thought there was an attack coming, you probably would have those with you ready to fire, right? But they're not. You're not seeing that. They don't seem to have like good air defenses either, like in their forward positions. Like you're not seeing like, trying to shoot down any close range aircraft. I haven't seen any evidence of any Ukrainian, like when you look at the destroyed equipment, you don't see any anti-aircraft equipment. So I think that's kind of telling. And the other problem is for the Ukrainians is logistics. The Russians are watching everything. Everything. They get UAVs over all the road systems, all the railroad systems. They're watching with satellites. They know where all the Western equipment's going. My guess is, now I can't verify this. Like most of the stuff I'm telling you, I can verify with videos and photos and things, but it seems like the special forces from the Russians are totally infiltrated into Ukraine, and they're on road systems and things. And you'll see a lot of videos where these special forces, especially at night, are going to attack like an army truck or something, and it's probably carrying ammo and conscripts to the front lines. So my guess is that the Russians have infiltrated pretty heavily into the interior behind the positions of the Ukrainians, and they're basically destroying their whole logistic network. They also use a lot of missile strikes on all the command and control points. So it seems to be very little, like command and control at this point either. Like basically the Ukrainians are static positions right now. Hunker down in these trenches that they've built, and they're not bad. I mean, these trenches are probably kind of like World War I type, from what I can tell. They have some decent defenses for like a ground assault. Now you're not seeing a lot of anti-tank equipment. Like I said, like if you took out those Western infantry anti-tank equipment, which supposedly doesn't work very well, they don't know how to use, there's no like anti-tank guns. Like, you would think that they would have some anti-tank guns like dug in, and they could strike back at the Russian tanks. That's possible, but you don't see any of that. There's none of that. And there's also very little counter fire, artillery fire. It seems like the Russians have pretty much destroyed that. So it's basically like, the Ukrainians are set up for like a World War I kind of thing, but we're in 2022, and you're defending against an army that has countless UAVs, massive artillery, and not just artillery the way you think. It's artillery of 2020s. It's devastating. It's like when you look at that Snake Island video, you see like that strike what hit that helicopter. I mean, this is not a little tiny little missile. What hit that thing was some god awful heavy ordnance. I mean, it blasted like a couple football fields as well and killed everyone who debarked off that helicopter on Snake Island. I mean, it's unbelievable, the force of artillery these days. It's because I follow a lot of World War II stuff. I can tell you this is nothing like the World War II stuff. You're probably talking on 10 orders of magnitude more intense. So, and they also use a lot of like the rockets. Like there's some rocket systems. They're probably from like the 1950s is my guess. The Katyusha rockets. It looks like the DNR has a bunch of those, and they're just blanketing positions, and that's old school stuff. So there's still some of that, and that's like horrific to be, if they get that accurate. It's to be under a Katyusha attack is unbelievable. These are the things that break enemies' artillery, and the Russians know it. They've known that since World War II, and they've got a lot of artillery. They've always believed that that's the way you defeat your enemies, and that's how they defeated the Nazis. It was so bad for the Germans in World War II that they had to abandon the front lines. Like in the later part of the war, they would put like some, the Volksgrenaders, you could call them. They're the fairly untrained conscripts of the German army. They would put those in the front lines, and they pull back their best stuff into a further line back in the behind that, so that after the Russian attack, they could move those troops back up into the forward position after the artillery, because it was so intense that nothing lived. And they've only perfected that now. So another thing that I've been following, that there's a Russian a Chechen unit that pretty much has a video every day of their activities, and they'll show firefights. It seems like they have a couple of armored cars, and maybe one tank that kind of supports them. And there's probably about 15 or 20 of these guys. And they take a lot of like videos and so on. And you have even the commander is there with this unit, and they've been doing this every day. They were in Mariupol, street fighting, and now they're over attacking near Kharkov area, or probably south of that. I don't know the exact villages and so on where they are, but the thing, what I'm getting at with them, is they have no casualties. They're the same guys every day, and they've been fighting non-stop for 2 months. Think about that. I mean, it's amazing. Like, how can you stay in the front lines for like 2 months straight? These guys are tough Chechen fighters, and they are probably kill ratios that are off the charts. I mean, these guys, I don't see the casualties, and they're in the front lines, literally. And it's so that obviously the techniques that the Russians are using are working very well. And you also have to keep in mind that Ukraine is massive. Okay, look how long it took the Allies to go across France. Okay, now keep in mind, Eastern Ukraine is probably bigger than France, and it took a year for the Western forces to get through France and over to the Rhine. All right, a year. Okay, so you've got Russia did about half of that in a month or so. Okay, so the whole thing that Russia's failing, and they're going to probably use tactical nukes and things because they're not getting where they wanted to be, and they're not hitting their goals and all this. It's all propaganda. Because when you see the actual footage, and you see the Russians putting up flags in the administration building after administration building, it paints a completely different story. So I just want to share my thoughts on what I see that's going on in Ukraine. And again, I'm not picking sides here. I think that this military operation will go down in history, good and bad. The thing that I see is that this combat approach that the Russians are doing is warfare on another level that we have never seen before. With UAVs and their approach to how they're attacking positions, this is amazing, and it's going to be studied by the Americans. And believe me, they are scared to death of what they're seeing that the Russians are doing, because America does not